In this video, I explore the similarities between the Sumerian god Enki, the Greek god Hephaestus, in addition to the Hebrew god Yahweh. By analyzing the texts of these ancient civilizations, I argue we can conclude the Greek smithy god Hephaestus and the Hebrew god Yahweh as derivative of the Sumerian god Enki. In particular, in this video, we're going to be talking about the Greek poet Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and 3 Sumerian epic poems, along with the book of Exodus from the Hebrew Bible. In my previous video, I explored the similarities between the Greek gods the Cyclopes and the Sumerian god Enki, both of them being these chthonic deities whose ascension from their subterranean lair signifies the changing of the political structure of the gods, where the rising up from the absu by Enki in the Sumerian mythos is like the Cyclopes rising up from Tartarus, both of them at the behest of their mothers. And their rise comes at a time of political upheaval where the celestial gods, Anu in the Sumerian case, and Uranus in the Greek, are castrated and supplanted by these chthonic gods as chief rulers of the universe. In Greek, this castration is a later mythological interpretation of the real worship of a celestial god in Sumer, Anu, and it tells the story of his eventual decline in importance with the rise of the Semitic-speaking Akkadians, led by the ruler Sargon of Akkad, and the gods that they worshipped, chiefly being Enlil, an equivalent of the Greek titan Cronus. And the Sumerians, or the Akkadians, explain this through the poem Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Netherworld. In the myth of the Hulupu tree, with it eventually being blown down by the south wind in the Euphrates River, an allegory for the castration of the sky god Anu and the rise of the Semitic gods of the Akkadians. And this brings us to the subject of this video. Hephaestus, another chthonic god who we know from multiple ancient accounts, like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and Hesiod's Theogony, as well as Apollodorus' Bibliotheca. While they each may differ slightly, they all seem to associate Hephaestus, like Enki, with the cavernous underground, figures that are cast away from the main assembly of the gods, like Hephaestus and his association with caves, and for Enki, the absu, where both rise up with help from motherly figures, and it's these mother figures who provide the tension needed to unleash these revolutionary mechanisms that come in the form of these chthonic smithy gods. Right? So like the Cyclopes who bring legitimacy to the rule of Cronus and Zeus, they are the ones that essentially turn the tide in the Titan War when they build Zeus's lightning bolt, Poseidon his trident, and Pluto his helmet. And their rise from the underground is symbolized by the themes of sexual reproduction, like birth, where the absu, Tartarus, a volcano are symbolic of a womb, and we need to think of this in the civilizational context as well, like where Ovid describes that everything in life obeys a cycle of seasonal changes, much like a human is born, matures, and it's reproduced all over again, just like these epic cycles of Sumerian and Greek mythos, where the birth of a new child signifies the end of one ruling class and the ascendance of a new generation of gods to lord over the earth. And of course, we also have the same type of metaphor to describe this cyclic pattern of life, with each age of man or generation of gods referred to as a metal, with the gold and silver race as the mythological ages. And there's the bronze and iron ages, which are real historically accepted eras, and sandwiched in between them is the heroic age of the Trojan War in the Iliad, the heroic age of the late Bronze Age. The time of the Trojan horse is when we get to know Hephaestus. In Homer's Iliad, well, he's not the most mentioned or active god. He plays a pivotal role in the poem. And it's really how we can understand Hephaestus as this Mycenaean Bronze Age conception of the Sumerian god Enki, and later interpretation of the god the Cyclopes that I argue. And from Hesiod's Theogony and Apollodorus' Bibliotheca, we have this version of Hephaestus who's born from Hera without union with Zeus, which we can interpret as either some type of infidelity to Zeus by Hera or an immaculate conception of some sort. And we'll read from Hesiod's Theogony. But Hera, without union with Zeus, for she was very angry and quarreled with her mate, bare famous Hephaestus, who is skilled in crafts more than all the sons of heaven. But Hera was very angry and quarreled with her mate, and because of this strife she bore without union with Zeus, who holds the aegis, a glorious son, Hephaestus, who excelled all the sons of heaven in crafts. Now compare to Apollodorus' Bibliotheca, Book 1, Chapter 3, Section 5. Hera gave birth to Hephaestus without intercourse with the other sex, but according to Homer, he was one of her children by Zeus. Him Zeus cast out of heaven, because he came to the rescue of Hera in her bonds. For when Hercules had taken Troy and was at sea, Hera sent a storm after him. So Zeus hung her from Olympus. Hephaestus fell on Lemnos and was lamed of his legs, but Thetis saved him. And it could be from this relationship outside the genetic line of Zeus that the tension is formed between him and Hephaestus and Hera, like with Enki, his mother, and the other main assembly of the gods in Sumerian mythology. Maybe it was infidelity, and Apollodorus in his account has Hephaestus thrown from Olympus and made lame from the fall. In Homer, right in the beginning of Book 1 of the Iliad, we see a retelling of some sort of the dynamic between mother and son, Hera and Hephaestus, and the problems they have with their father, who is the chief ruling god. And that's how Zeus, of course, got to power himself, and his father Cronus, by usurping their father, overthrowing them. And perhaps that was the cause of these family problems, this fear of being overthrown by your son. Now let's read from Homer's Iliad to get a glimpse of the family dynamic at play. The Iliad, Book 1. On this, Hera was frightened, so she curbed her stubborn will and sat down in silence. But the heavenly beings were disquieted throughout the house of Zeus, till the cunning workman Hephaestus began to try and pacify his mother Hera. "It will be intolerable," said he, "if you two fall to wrangling and setting heaven in an uproar about a pack of mortals. If such ill counsels are to prevail, we shall have no pleasure at our banquet. Let me then advise my mother, and she must herself know that it will be better to make friends with my dear father Zeus, lest he again scold her and disturb our feast. If the Olympian thunderer wants to hurl us all from our seats, he can do so, for he is far the strongest. So give him fair words, and he will then soon be in a good humor with us." Right, so Zeus is the strongest and most powerful of the gods, and will literally hurl you down if he gets a whiff of dissent from the junior Olympian gods, his sons and daughters. And Hephaestus knows this, as he's already was made lame by the same fate. And fast forward to Book 18 of the Iliad, Homer, through the narrative of the epic poem, falls along with Thetis, the mother of Achilles, where she goes to Hephaestus' workshop to ask him a favor, to make her son, the hero of the Trojan War, Achilles, his new suit of armor and shield for his return to battle. And during this interaction, Hephaestus recalls his exile from Olympus and how he was saved and nurtured by your enemy in Thetis in a cave. So let's read from the Iliad, Book 18. The goddess led the way as she spoke, and bade Thetis sit on a richly decorated seat inlaid with silver. There was a footstool also under her feet. Then she called Hephaestus and said, "Hephaestus, come here, Thetis wants you." And the far-famed lame god answered, "Then it is indeed an august and honored goddess who has come here. She was that took care of me when I was suffering from the heavy fall which I had through my cruel mother's anger. For she would have got rid of me because I was lame. It would have gone hardly with me had not your enemy, daughter of the ever-encircling waters of Uranus, and Thetis, taken care of me in their bosom. 9 years did I stay with them, and many beautiful works in bronze, brooches, spiral armlets, cups, and chains did I make for them in their cave, while the roaring waters of Oceanus foaming as they rushed ever past it. And no one knew, neither of gods nor men, save only Thetis and your enemy, who took care of me. If then Thetis has come to my house, I must make her due requital for having saved me, entertain her, therefore, with all hospitality, while I put by my bellows and all my tools." And this is very similar to the Sumerian poem Enki and Ninmah, where Enki is in this water abyss or subterranean aquifer known as the absu, and he's being pleaded with by his mother to rise up from his dormant state and help facilitate this new fashioning of men, created from the clay at the top layer of the absu. And Thetis in the Iliad goes to Hephaestus, and she's like this mother or midwife-like figure to him. And she's like the character Namu or Ninmah in the Sumerian mythos. And Thetis asks Hephaestus for his skill and his craft to make the shield for Achilles. so he can go back and win the war for the Greeks and free the Olympians from their toil, so to say, in the epic. And like in Enki and Nimrod, Hephaestus is essentially hiding out in a place where no one knew, neither the god nor men. And this is literally how the state of Enki and the absu is described in Enki and Nimrod, and also in the Iliad. So let me read from Enki and Nimrod, lines 1 through 11. In those days, in the days when heaven and earth were created, now skipping ahead some, the senior gods oversaw the work, while the minor gods were bearing the toil. Gods were digging the canals and piling up the silt. The gods dredging the clay began complaining about this life. Lines 12 through 23. At that time, the one of great wisdom, the creator of all the senior gods, Enki, lay on his bed, not waking up from his sleep, in the deep absu, in the flowing water, the place inside of which no other god knows. The god said, weeping, he is the cause of the lamenting. Namu, the primeval mother who gave birth to the senior gods, took the tears of the gods to the one who lay sleeping, to the one who did not wake up from his bed, to her son. Are you really lying there asleep and not awake? The gods, your creatures, are smashing there. My son, wake up from your bed. Please apply the skill deriving from your wisdom and create a substitute for the gods so they can be freed from their toil. And if you keep reading the poem Enki and Nimrod, they eventually do create new junior gods to free the senior gods from their labor and responsibilities. And one of these is a Hephaestus-like character. He's a silversmith and has 2 broken feet, while one is paralyzed. So, like Hephaestus, this lame smithy god, and with a disfigured foot. So it seems like this idea of a malformed or maimed, crafty god is as old as the Sumerian myths. Lines 66 through 68. Third, Nimrod fashioned one with both feet broken, one with paralyzed feet. Enki looked at the one with both feet broken, the one with paralyzed feet, and for him the work of the silversmith, and he appointed him as servant of the king. So Nimrod creates out of clay a being with broken and paralyzed feet that Enki makes silversmith. And this could be how Apollodorus's and Hesiod's version of Hephaestus' conception came to being, as a god born without union between Hera and Zeus. And there's many more similarities between these mythos that are noticeable as these salient themes, and most recognizable being that of sexual intercourse or reproduction and birth. And this metaphor is developed through the symbolism of the underground that we associate with chthonic deities. And we can think of the absu and cave that Hephaestus is nurtured in as a metaphor for the womb and birth of a child. And with this birth, the cycle repeats where an old power is overthrown and a new order is established with the new generation of gods. Like in Book 18 of the Iliad, the cave where Eurynomy and Thetis take Hephaestus is described as being surrounded by the ocean, or literally in the Iliad, the god Oceanus, and it's swirling around. Just imagine it's a womb. And Hephaestus plays a pivotal role in the Iliad where he supplies the new armor and shield to Achilles. And like the Cyclopes in Enki, his rise signifies this new regime. And they themselves bring legitimacy to this new ruling class. Right, the Greeks can't win without Achilles fighting. And he's in this huge feud with Agamemnon. And it's this birth of Hephaestus retold. And we can imagine it's happening at that moment, even though it's an obvious retelling during the poem, but it's like the anachronistic form of an epic or mythology. Like things can happen simultaneously or before or after. It's like Schrodinger's cat or something. And Achilles, like Hephaestus, spends 9 years in the cave, right? Where Achilles, he's in Troy for 9-10 years when we get to him. And then a birth, right? The sack of Troy, men coming out of this horse. And it's like a change of fortunes to the Greek side. And the end of this old Greek civilization of Troy, with this 9 to 10 years is this obvious amount of time a pregnancy takes using a lunar calendar. And it's the armor and shield that Hephaestus makes for Achilles that tips the scales, as Achilles goes back to fighting eventually with the Greeks. And much like the Titan War that lasted 10 years, and it was the Cyclopes making a lightning bolt for Zeus, and it was because of their craft work that the Olympians were able to defeat the Titans after 10 years of battle. And it was the Cyclopes who brought validity to both Cronus and Zeus. And this cyclic power dynamic is told through the metaphor of the smithy god, through the symbolism of metals representing ages and races of men. So when Hephaestus creates Achilles' new shield and armor, the whole scene in the narrative is littered with allegories of like this kind, right? So when Thetis first gets to Hephaestus' workshop, it's explained that it's made of bronze, like the age I reckon Hephaestus presides over, where the Bronze Age was this time, as Hesiod describes, when men were hardened and tough and like they went to war and that was their passion, and everything was made out of bronze, their armor, their homes, and tools. Again, Hephaestus' age, where he works. Additionally, Homer describes these automatons made of gold, representing the golden race that never did any work and were served all their needs and wants. And then there's a silver seat for Thetis to rest on, like this, the silver race or age of men that were foolish and lazy. And then her feet are described as like silver-footed, which I understand as the ground or dirt, or the current heroic age of the Iliad, or maybe it's the Iron Age that Homer is writing in. And it's like the Colossus in the book of Daniel, right, where these metals are civilizations or races of men, and the heroic age is coming to an end. The Bronze Age collapse is coming, and it's going to be consumed in the fiery pit of Hephaestus' furnace and remade, right, to keep these themes in mind when I read. So from Homer's Iliad, Book 18. Meanwhile, Thetis came to the house of Hephaestus, imperishable, star-bespangled, fairest of the abodes in heaven, a house of bronze wrought by the lame god's own hands. She found him busy with his bellows, sweating and hard at work, for he was making 20 tripods that were to stand by the wall of his house, and he set wheels of gold under them, all that they might go of their own selves to the assemblies of the gods, and come back again, marvels indeed to see. They were finished all but the ears of cunning workmanship, which yet remained to be fixed to them. These he was now fixing, and he was hammering at the rivets. While he was thus at work, silver-footed Thetis came to the house. Charis, of graceful headdress, wife to the far-famed lame god, came towards her as soon as she saw her, and took her hand in her own, saying, "Why have you come to our house, Thetis, honored and ever welcome? For you do not visit us often. Come inside and let me set refreshments before you." The goddess led the way as she spoke, and bade Thetis sit on a richly decorated seat inlaid with silver. There was a footstool also underneath her feet. Then she called Hephaestus and said, "Hephaestus, come here, Thetis wants you." We can understand these similar themes and symbols used in the Sumerian, Greek, and Hebrew mythos as part of this larger story of creation myth, where ages of men described through the four metals and heroic ages, and chthonic deities with the symbolism of the underground play onto themes of sex and reproduction as allegory for the seasonality of nature, mankind, and civilization. And these are used as components to tell this grander story of the creation of the universe itself. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and look out for the next one in this series exploring the similarities between the Sumerian god Enki and the Greek god Hephaestus, along with the Hebrew deity Yahweh. See ya!